Welcome to the Goretti Publications Podcast. This is Donald Goodman. This is Season 1, Episode 6, Narrative Poetry. But before we begin, let me remind you, Goretti Publications is a small publishing house that produces both original and reprinted works of all types, including theology, philosophy, spirituality, history, and a large quantity of original poetry. Our website is gorettipub.org. We can also be found on Mastodon, Twitter, and Blue Sky. Please consider subscribing to our RSS or Atom feeds. And now, on with the show. It was long held throughout the world, not merely in the Western world, but everywhere, that if it was worth saying in verse. Especially the most important and fundamental texts of a people, its origin stories, were recorded in verse. We see this in the grand epics of the Greeks, the Iliad and the Odyssey. We see it in Beowulf, in the Epic of Gilgamesh, in the creation story of Assurbanipal, and even in the Hebrew Bible, about a third of which is written in verse. We all know about the Psalms, of course, which are obviously versified, though their organization is very different from that of modern poetry. In Hebrew, Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, and the minor prophets are nearly entirely in verse, and there is poetry interspersed throughout the scriptures. The Greeks often wrote even their philosophy and science in verse. Parmenides wrote in verse. Lucretius, the 1st century BC Epicurean philosopher, wrote his magnum opus, De Rerum Natura, in 7,400 lines of verse. Aratus wrote his scientific astronomy in verse. The text of the famous cattle problem from Archimedes to Eratosthenes was written in verse. Pythagoras, the famous mathematician and somewhat unhinged mystic, wrote his work in verse. Why was verse so important to the ancients? One important reason is memory. It is easier to remember verse than prose. Sometimes the examples of this are very basic, and yet nearly universal. I have seen grizzled carpenters with decades of experience remind themselves of the correct way to turn the screw by saying to themselves, righty-tighty, lefty-loosey. Is this a work of great poetry? Obviously not. But is it a versification that greatly aids the memory? Obviously yes. A better example might be the lengths of the months. Our months are not all of the same length. Our year's length does not cooperate with that goal, and history has led to the months not being evenly distributed throughout the year. Most confusingly, we have 2 long months with 31 days right after each other, July and August, and 1 extra short month, February. We could, of course, remember this the prose way by simply reciting the months in their length one after the other. But nobody does. Instead, we remember a simple poem. 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. All the rest of 31, but February, the shortest one. This is the version I have memorized, but some versions are even more detailed. 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. All the rest of 31, except February, 28 days clear, and 29 in each leap year. Or, 30 days hath September, April, June, and November. All the rest have 31, except February at 28. But leap year coming once in 4, February then has 1 day more. Then there are similar poetic mnemonics for memorization of grammatical rules, such as the irregular imperatives in Latin, of which, mercifully, there are only 4. Dic, duc, fac, fair should be an E, but it's not there. Or, note socer, gener, liberi, and liber, god of revelry. Like puer, these retain the E. For those second-declension nouns that retain an E in their stems, when the rest drop it. Or frankly, even the rules for English spelling. When 2 vowels go walking, the first does the talking. Or, I before E except after C, and when sounding like A as in neighbor and sleigh. And it's worth noting that, while not exactly verse, there is a reason that we sing our alphabet rather than merely say it. The rhythm gives us a much easier way to actually remember it. Even in religion, we have important mnemonics which depend upon versification and rhyme, as for example the 12 apostles. This is the way the disciples run. Peter, Andrew, James, and John, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas next in Matthew 2, James the Less and James the Greater, Simon the Zealot, and Judas the Traitor. It is unquestionable that verse is an enormous aid to memory. The whole concept of an earworm only works lyrically, not prosaically. No one ever had an earworm from a dissertation. Writing in verse can also be very useful for isolating points from others, transitioning from one topic to another, and so forth. Consider Edna St. Vincent Millay's poem, The Philosopher, which has 4 distinct stanzas, each with different rhymes, each of which makes a different point. And what are you that wanting you I should be kept awake, as many nights as there are days, with weeping for your sake? And what are you that missing you, in as many days as crawl, I should be listening to the wind and looking at the wall? I know a man that's a braver man, and 20 men as kind. And what are you that you should be the one man in my mind? Yet women's ways are witless ways, as any sage will tell. And what am I that I should love so wisely and so well? The first verse asks what there is about this person that should lead her to be so deeply emotionally affected by this individual, who is nameless. Indeed, his name is utterly irrelevant to the point, and that point is all the stronger for us having no idea who the object of the poem is. This is the verse rhyming awake, sake. Then there is a verse rhyming crawl, wall. Her interest leads not only to sorrow, as in the first verse, but even to a sort of catatonic inaction, listening to the wind, staring at the wall in inactivity, perhaps even paralysis. Then there is a verse rhyming kind mind, which points out that although this man has led her to sorrow and paralysis, he isn't even that great a man. She knows that there are braver and even kinder men around, and yet this one is the one that has lodged in her heart. Why? And finally, the denouement. There isn't any sense in it at all. Women's ways are witless ways, and yet her love for this man, who isn't nearly as great a man as the depth of her love would imply, is still itself a prodigy. How should she love so wisely and so well, when women's ways are witless ways? Perhaps, after all, women's ways aren't so witless as they might seem. Miss Millay could easily have written a little essay or an open letter about how strange it is that love leads us to a deep and often anguishing interest in individuals all out of proportion to their objective worth. And yet it would not have been nearly as effective as this short yet profound set of verses. Of course, later in her life, Miss Millay's poetry was often denigrated by free verse modernists due to its use of traditional forms, but we have already explored the foolishness behind such nonsense in an earlier episode. It's also worth noting that Millay's personal life is far from being an example to a Christian. Indeed, it is full of dissipation and sometimes outright wickedness, but this work is still a fine one and an excellent example of our thesis. Verse can also impart on a text a strength and an inspiration that it would otherwise lack, or at least have in significantly less degree. We hear of the ancient heroes giving great speeches to their men in verse, using grand and ancient formulas to instill spirit and warlike vigor into their armies. Sadly, we do not have the text of such great speeches, but a wonderful example is, as always, the immortal bard, William Shakespeare, who made such a powerful example of it in his history play, Henry V, when one of his men wished that they had more soldiers on their own side. What's he that wishes so? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enow to do our country loss, and if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. By Jove, I am not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if men my garments wear, such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I am the most offending man alive. No, faith, my coz, wish not a man from England. God's peace, I would not lose so great an honor as one man more, methinks, would share from me for the best hope I have. Oh, do not wish one more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he which hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall live this day and see old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors, and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then he will strip his sleeve and show his scars, and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother, be he ne'er so vile. This day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day. It is impossible to read this, or especially to hear this, as it was meant to be received, without being inspired. Even though it contains some unfamiliar vocabulary, crowns for convoy, and meaningless to us names, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester. We know what this means and what we must do. We have all been inspired, before a game or something similar, by prose given to us by a coach or a leader. But can we honestly claim that any such was even remotely as inspiring as this verse masterpiece? Nor need the verse be the beautiful, lilting blank verse of Renaissance England, as above. Tolkien's character Theoden inspires his men with a beautiful, short, alliterative piece. Arise, arise, riders of Rohan, fell deeds awake, fire and slaughter. Spears shall be shaken, shield be splintered. A sword day, a red day, ere the sun rises. Ride now, ride now, ride to Gondor. This is a very orthodox Old English type alliterative poem that is every bit as inspiring as Henry's. It is recorded that many men could give poetic speeches off the cuff. They were obviously not as polished, I'm sure, as the examples we've given above, which benefit from calm and peaceful composition. But I am also quite sure that the formulas of pre-modern poetic composition would allow for credibly poetic inspiration to be delivered in this way. History and philosophy can also be credibly delivered in this way. In English, the best medium for such is likely blank verse, or potentially alliterative verse. Our original poem this week is The Question, a poem on a philosophical question, death, written in blank verse. It is not, like our poem in our last episode, Death Has Been Cheated Once, a lyrical exploration of an aspect of Christian belief regarding death. Rather, it is a real philosophical discussion about death, how the pagans perceived it, from a heroic standpoint and from an Epicurean standpoint, what was wrong with these standpoints, how a Christian perceives it, and how this perception is better than the others. Do you remember what you asked me, friend? You asked me if I was afraid to die. That question made me think of many things. It made me think about my college days when I read Plato telling me about the condemnation Socrates endured, and what he said when people asked him that. He didn't know what happened after death, but neither did he worry. No, he said that even though he didn't know the truth, the gods must know it, and since they are good, he shouldn't worry and would trust in them. And Socrates was not the first man asked that question. No, it's plagued the mind of man for ages, nor has any answer gained the general agreement of mankind. The undiscovered country, that is true. A mystery which people cannot solve, but which we all must face before too long, and learn the answer finally in the end. And darkness always holds a mystery. Our minds fill in what our eyes don't see and make a story which will give some shape to what is otherwise a shapeless void. And so we do with death, but even more. Not only is its shape concealed from us, but no one else can see it during life, and after someone knows what lies beyond, he can no longer tell us what he saw. And this is just the nature of our lives. We cannot know what comes when we must leave the world we've come to know, and so we fear. It's like the ancient maps, which in the West, not knowing what comes next, just let the mind fill in the details, showing scary beasts and monsters which the real world never knew. This terror, that's the fear that built the world. The fear that led the pharaohs long ago to flog their slaves to build those monuments that even to this day blot out the sun in their attempt to shed some light on death. Great tombs to lead them to another world, which in their terror they believed must be a lot like that they left behind. That fear compelled the heroes to their famous deeds. It made Achilles storm the walls of Troy, Diomedes to fight the gods themselves. Their terror at what came when they should die compelled them to do things that we would note and talk about forever. In that way, they hoped to live beyond their days of death, avoiding that great pit of the unknown which could well end the world for them for good. This terror made the Romans seize the world, to get themselves an empire that would last and spread their fame for ages yet to come, so they could live forever in the songs and memories of people far beyond the day they stepped beyond the world of light and into that thick blackness which conceals the undiscovered country from us all. But then some people didn't fear at all, but not because they knew, because despair had led them not to care what came beyond. Instead, they lived their lives and ate and drank and reveled in what time they had. What came when all their time was up was no concern as long as they were comfortable in life. But what about the poor, about the slaves, about the ones that didn't have enough? Well, there was nothing for them but despair, to grab what little they could grab, and then just suffer through it. That must be enough. And when they suffered, they could not rejoice. The only time they had was misery, and they had nothing to look forward to except the end of sorrow, not to joy. They were like dogs, who when their master's kind could live a happy life, and eat and play in comfort, knowing that there's always more, and having no concern about their deaths. But who, if they're unlucky, will be kicked and beaten, never having food and drink enough to fill their stomachs. Hungry, cold, unloved, they live their lives until they die, and then they cease to be, their wasted lives absorbed by endless, pointless misery. And this indifference built our sorry world, the lucky resting on the backs of those who aren't so lucky. Many's misery permits the decent lives of just a few. But lucky or unlucky, when we die, we need not worry what might lie beyond. And so, my friend, your question comes again. Am I afraid to die? No, I am not. Because I don't need to fill the details in with wild imagination. I do know what lies beyond the curtain of life's end. For me, the veil was ripped apart in two, and what was hidden shone in day's full light, the sun now shining brightly on the shapes whose mysteries confounded ages past and struck so many of our ancestors with terror or despair. And when I pain, I know my pain has purpose. I am not a dog whose master takes his anger out on some poor animal. I know my pains and sufferings are not a waste of life, but just a trial I must endure on this, the road from life into the light beyond. Diomedes once fought the gods of Greece, struck Aphrodite as an enemy. But God, my God, is not some hateful foe, but rather is my friend, my closest friend, who loves me as no other can, who sees and guards me through my life, whose loving care embraces me along that winding road which leads me to my death. My suffering is real, true misery. But I know God knows all about my sorrows. He himself took all of them and more upon himself, becoming human in all ways but sin, including suffering. He died for me, to make up for my sins and those of all the human race. We suffer not like dogs, but like our God, who suffered for us all. So am I always happy? No, I'm not. I often suffer from despair and fear, a lack of trust in what I have been told. Much like a prodigy who takes a test and knows that he has passed it, nonetheless he agonizes, waiting for the score that he already knows will be an A. My comfort's not emotional. At times I feel quite happy, like a newlywed who overflows with passionate desire and love for her who gave herself to him. But just as often, possibly more so, I'm like that couple 25 years on, when all the luster's been rubbed off and stale familiarity has now replaced what once was pure delight, or even more, a tired and sad disgust with one who now exasperates much more than she delights. Oh no, my comfort doesn't make me smile as if it were some magic happy pill to wipe away all sadness and regret. I do feel sadness at what makes me sad. I feel regret and guilt for what I've done, which I should not have. Nothing wipes away those feelings, nor do I think something should. But something can now wipe away the sins that make me feel that guilt, and I can use my guilty feelings to make up for all the wrongs that I have done to God and man. My comfort isn't that my sadness stops. It's that my sadness has a purpose too, as much as does my happiness and joy. A hero who gives up his precious life to save another doesn't hurt the less because his suffering saves someone else. To say he does reduces what he's done and makes it selfish. No, he truly pains, but he endures the pain because it brings a good about which otherwise would die. So all that pagan sorrow long ago and all its heirs still living on today was like a hero perishing in fire, but not to save another, in the hope that someone might remember all his pain and sing a song about it later on. Or even worse, to make sure some aesthete will have a happy life before he dies without a recompense for him himself. My sorrow, though, is sorrow with an end, which doesn't make it lesser, but which does give it a meaning which makes it worthwhile. It isn't warm and fuzzy like a dream a little girl might have with rainbows bright and unicorns and kittens. What a joke, a parody the world will never know. Oh no, it hurts. It hurts as much for me as it would hurt for anybody else. But it's a pain I know is something more. Although it feels like it will never end, I know that it is really very short, that God himself endured what I endure for me, so I can now do it for him. This is the light that changed the ancient world and all mankind forever. This the light that put to flight the darkness that conceals the undiscovered country from us all. We need not struggle without hope for life. Our sorrows are just covers for our joy, which ending will be thrown off to the wind to make a way for joy without an end or any alloy. So I don't fear death, or any suffering in life. I love my sorrows, for they are the keys I need to open up the gates to lasting joy. No, faith does not eliminate all pain, but it gives meaning to it. I do know what happens after death, for God has told it all, and he is good, and so I trust. This could be an essay. We could be exploring these notions of death and pagan ideas of death as opposed to Christian ones by writing a lengthy prose monologue with footnotes and arguments. Instead, this is a poetical explanation of those questions, which the author suggests gets at the same notions with at least the same level of depth, and does so in a more readable way, particularly when listening rather than reading, as poetry is really supposed to be consumed. Thank you. Until next time, this has been GorPod, the Goretti Publications podcast. Our intro and outro music is Woodland Fantasy by Matthew Pablo, generously released under the Creative Commons Attribution 3.0 license. We have made no changes other than clipping and fading as appropriate. The license is available at https://creativecommons.org/licenses/by/3.0, and the song itself is available at opengameart.org/content/woodland-fantasy. Mr. Pablo's website is matthewpablo.com. Our use of this material does not imply his endorsement in any way. This has been the Goretti Publications podcast, gorettipub.org. Thank you for listening.